Nothing new under the sun, I suppose. I just bought this for $300. A guy had posted it on Facebook. He said he parked it in his barn a while ago. There was nothing actually seriously wrong with it. It was just old, and I'm sure it has lots of small problems, and he went and bought a brand new one and just wanted to get rid of this one. So I'm gonna see if I can't spiff it up a little bit and make some money on it. It was missing the battery, so I went and got one. I'm gonna toss that in here and see if it'll turn over. Let me double check the oil. I checked it actually before I bought it. Yeah, it is on the stick. It's low, but it'll be all right just to test it. See if there's anything in this tank. No. Okay, that's a good sign. So I'll put a little gas in it, put that battery in it, and see what happens. All right. Key switch isn't wanting to work very well, so I'm just going to jump the solenoid here with a screwdriver. It runs and drives. The blades do actually work now. I got them working right after I turned the camera off. I just turned them off and on a few more times, and they broke free. I think these electric clutches have a brake built into them, and I think the brake was just stuck from sitting. Maybe it rusted or something. But that works fine now, so that's good. It's not running right. It wants to overspeed, and it doesn't want to maintain a constant RPM like it should, which suggests issues with the governor. And actually, just now that I'm looking at it right here, I think, oh yeah, okay, the bolt that holds the governor arm onto the cross shaft is loose. So that would perfectly explain that. This arm had a regular bolt in it like that with a hex head on it, and it's supposed to have a bolt like this with like a square head on it so that it fits up against these bosses like that and doesn't turn. So I just stole one of these bolts off an engine I had in the scrap pile, and I'm going to put it back together with that. I adjusted the governor mechanism as per the service manual, and it made no difference at all. It's running exactly the same. So I think the problem must be internal. So what I'm going to do, well, actually the first thing I'm going to do is just idle it out and wash everything off to make it more pleasant to work on, and then I'll bring it back in here and just basically take everything off the back of it and take this back cover off and take a look at that gear. Ah, that is where the governor gear is supposed to be. As you can see, it has disintegrated and left little pieces of it all in the crankcase there, and I even found some inside the oil drain plug. So that would definitely explain why the governor wasn't working. Everything else in here looks pretty good though, so I'm gonna get a governor gear ordered along with some other parts I need for this thing, and get this all cleaned up and ready to go back together, and I will bring you back. The parts I ordered for the engine seem to be stuck in permanent back order purgatory, so I've got some other parts. I'm going to skip around a little bit and work on some other stuff. First thing I want to do is put tires on it. These back tires have good tread, but they're very dry rotted and they won't hold air. The front tires are worn out and dry rotted and don't hold air. So I've got some good used back tires and some brand new front tires to put on. Extra valve stem rolling around in there. wheel has got bad bearings in it, so I'm going to try to get those out before I put this new tire on it. On closer inspection, it turns out the bearings are actually fine. It's got little tapered roller bearings, which is pretty cool. It is missing a spacer that goes between the mounting bolt and the bearing there, so there's a bunch of play, and that made me think the bearings were bad. So I'll have to get one of those, and also the seals were bad, so I'll need those as well. But I went ahead and put the tire on this wheel, so that'll be done, and then I can just put it back together as soon as I get that spacer and seals. I got that spacer and those seals, so this is kind of how it looks when it's all assembled without the wheel on it. You've got the spacer, and then you've got these little spacers that go inside the seals. They go on there like that, and the bearings are just inboard of that, and then the whole thing goes into the fork and gets clamped together. And like say, this spacer was what was missing, so everything was just kind of flopping around in there. And drop that in there, and then press this seal in. Flip it over and do that. There we go. Right through the middle of everything. This is the part that was missing before. Just like that. Before I put the wheels back on, I need to address these front caster forks that are both bent. Hopefully you can see they're both bent in towards the middle of the mower. That one is, and this one is even a little bit worse, I think. Normally with something like that, I would just find a way to bend it back, but these are specifically designed to move out of the way whenever you put pressure on them so that they don't bend. I'm sure if I tried hard enough, I could find a way to overcome that and bend these back anyway. But as it turns out, you can buy brand new aftermarket caster forks for this thing for 65 bucks a piece. So that is exactly what I did. It's just got some nice new ones here. So I'm just gonna install those and go on about it. The bearings on this fork are all rusted up and kind of trashed. They've obviously had a lot of water in them. Under any other circumstance, I would replace these, but this is like the least critical application for a tapered roller bearing ever. And I'm sick of waiting on parts, so I'm just going to clean these up as best I can and reuse them. The problem I've run into is that on these cheap aftermarket forks, the grease seals don't actually fit. They're supposed to ride right here on this larger painted part. That's how they were on the factory ones. But on these ones, it's too big for the seal to actually fit over. I can't really think of a way around that. I thought of maybe making a little spacer to let the seal ride right here. But if I do that, then this part is no longer long enough to engage both the top and bottom bearing at the same time. So I'm just going to leave the seals out. They're not really that critical anyway. The bearings for this other side, I cleaned up as best I could. I washed all the grease off with solvent and then soaked them in hydrochloric acid to dissolve off the rust. They're pretty pitted, pretty bad shape. I should replace them, but Worst case scenario, the front wheel falls off of a very slow moving vehicle, so I'm just going to reuse them. We'll, however, clean out this rusty waterlogged grease in here. I went ahead and packed some grease into these crappy bearings just to try to give them somewhat of a chance at least. I think it's kind of neat that this mower uses this stack of Belleville washers to maintain tension on the tapered roller bearings. I've seen other mowers that use tapered roller bearings to hold the caster forks on, but I don't think I've seen them use these spring washers like this to hold them tight. That's kind of a neat design. Too fast. Alright, I'm satisfied that the bearings are actually turning and it's not just the spindle turning inside the bearing, which would be bad. That was a lot more trouble than it should have been, but I do finally have 4 functional wheels. I also got my engine parts, so I'm going to go ahead and put that back together. I got the engine cover all cleaned up, and I got the new governor gear here. As you can see, it's this plastic gear, and it's got these little flyweights on either side that sling out as it spins around. And when they come out, they push up this top hat looking piece in the middle. And as that piece gets pushed up, that in turn pushes against this little spoon arm here. It's actually all the way in. It should, when it's running, it kind of comes out like that, and then the top hat piece pushes against it, and that connects to this linkage here, which goes back to the carburetor there, and forces the throttle butterfly towards idle. So the throttle control forces it towards wide open, and then as it speeds up, the flyweights push out harder and harder, and they force it back towards idle, and eventually it finds equilibrium at about 3,600 RPM is what it should be for this engine, and most other engines like this. That was easy. Pour some lube on the crankshaft and camshaft. I can't remember if I showed this before, but something I like to do is use a syringe to apply silicone sealant to things. It gives you a nice small little bead and makes it really easy to control exactly where you're putting it, so you don't get RTV silicone all over everything. I'm trying to put the muffler back on, but before I do, I want to try to bend this heat shield back into shape. It's all out of whack and it looks really bad. So I'm going to try to straighten it out a little bit in the press here. It took a little bit more massaging off camera, but I think it came out really well. I got everything nice and straight and it fits on the muffler good. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this. This engine is still definitely over revving. I'm not sure why. I've been fooling around with it and trying to adjust stuff to make it run right. This screw right here, you're supposed to adjust to set the high idle speed. And I fiddled with it a bunch and got it to where it would idle at full throttle at about 3,600 RPM. But it won't really stay at a constant RPM. You can move the throttle back to idle and back to full throttle and it'll rev up too high or not high enough. It's just kind of all over the place, which is basically exactly what it was doing before. It also has no throttle response. I took it out and drove it around a little bit, and if you try to go up a hill, it just falls on its face as though the governor is not doing anything. So I am just going to take all this back off, drain the oil out, take the cover off, and see what's going on in there, because I have no other explanation for what it's doing. And everything looks perfect. Governor gear is fine. So I am at a bit of a loss. I will bring you back when I figure something out. I think I've got this thing running right now. To make a long story short, eventually I realized that the governor arm was slipping on the governor shaft for some reason. So I ended up taking the arm back off and opening it up as wide as I could, and then actually cut off a little piece of a feeler gauge and used that as a shim in between the arm and the shaft to take up the slack, and then I just tightened that back down, and it seems like it's working perfectly now. The only problems that I know of with this engine now are that this oil pressure switch and this valve cover are both leaking oil pretty bad, but I can deal with that later. That's not urgent. Now that I've got it running and driving, I want to work on the deck, specifically this area right here. It's all cracked up and bent, and I'm sure it has other little problems. deck has definitely seen better days. The biggest problem is right here on this end where it's cracked and bent and worn down. I was hoping I could fix this from the back side, but this baffle's in the way and it's welded in, so I can't move that. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm gonna do. But another thing I noticed is that this spindle housing is cracked really bad. So that needs to be replaced. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to take that out, and hopefully while I'm doing that I'll think of a way to fix this. Nice. That is no good at all. I got that all apart. That went well. Unfortunately, the replacement housing I ordered is completely wrong. That is the part number that Exmark lists on their website as being correct for this mower with this deck, but as you can hopefully see, I mean, it's just nothing about it matches, except for I think the bolt holes do. So I guess it's possible that somebody just replaced all the spindles on this deck at some point and used different parts, but in any case, I'm gonna go do some more digging and see if I can find this actual piece. I dug around on Exmark's website for a little while and found the part number for the correct spindle housing. These are used on a bunch of different Exmark applications, including a virtually identical zero turn to this one. As far as I can tell, it actually is identical except for the different spindle housings. So I'm not sure how these housings got on this mower that they're not supposed to be on, but it might have to do with the fact that these are way cheaper. This was only $20 and it came complete with bearings and a little seal protector and whatever these things are, and even new mounting bolts. I think that other housing that was bare was like $160, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and put the shaft into this one, and then, well, actually I need to fix the crack in the deck, and then I'll put this back together. I'm gonna take this ball joint press and some chunks of metal and see if I can maybe straighten this piece right here out a little bit. I did a little more straightening off camera and got this where I thought it needed to be, but then I cut out and bent a patch panel to go on the outside here, and it doesn't fit how I want it to. Let me see if I can hold this up. Kind of like that, so you can see the top edge fits just fine. But then on the bottom here, it's not coming together. So this bottommost panel of the deck does line up, but then this panel here looks like it's kind of bent in. So I guess, judging by how worn down this wheel mount is and how much damage there was to this corner of the deck, it's just been smashed in from hitting stuff over the years. So what I'm going to do is try to rig it up here and hook something to this and just pull this back out and make that panel fit better. That came out pretty good. I drilled some holes in it so I could do some rosette welds, because those are helpful to distribute the force instead of just relying on the weld around the perimeter. Tried to weld it on the inside as well. That kind of worked. The metal was just really thin and been out of shape, but I'm happy with it. It's a repair that matches the quality of the item being repaired, so you can't ask for more than that. As per tradition, the blades are shockingly worn out, so I did get some new ones. Before I put the deck back on, the last thing I need to do is fix these tensioner pulleys. And they had these little bushings in the pivot points. You can see how worn out this one is. It's got these little thin bushings you can't really see inside the bores that are also worn. And then this one is worn out and also seized up with rust. So I have to fool around a little bit here and figure out how to get these apart. trying to fix this valve cover leak. I just took the valve cover off and I found the gasket in several pieces. It looks like there might be a big piece missing. Oh yeah, that part was smashed under the cover, it looks like. So that would definitely explain why it was leaking. I don't have another gasket and I don't want to wait on one. So I think what I'm going to do is just clean this up really good and make a gasket with silicone. Okay, I got this all as clean as I'm getting it, so I'm just going to squirt a bunch of RTV silicone in where the gasket would go and put it back together and hope for the best. I got this all put back together. I replaced that leaky oil pressure sensor and put the intake back together. I replaced the belt for the hydraulic pumps. I was actually in dire need. As you can see, it was all cracked and dried out. And what happens with these multi-rib serpentine belts like this is they get little rocks embedded in them. I don't know if you can see them or not, but you get little rocks stuck in there, and then that's not really a problem until the belt gets dry and starts to slip, and then as it slips, the rocks wear the pulleys down and ruin them. So you want to make sure you change those on a regular basis. Also tied the battery down. Let's see, replaced the key switch because it was worn out to the point where the key would fall out while it was running, which was very annoying. So I think this thing is ready to go try out. just noticed while I was running it, it is pouring oil out of this little hole in the fan cowling right there. Let me see if I can start it up and show you. See, it's blown it all over the ground and everything. So the only thing I can think of that would cause that is a bad front main seal. Wonder how hard that is to change. Probably have to pull the engine out. But from there, I think it would be easy. That seal was definitely the problem. It was just kind of sitting there in the bore loose, pushed nearly all the way out. So that's obviously where all the oil was coming from. I'm not sure why it did that. I was looking online and apparently the main seals coming out is a really common problem on these engines. I couldn't find like a definitive reason for it, but it kind of looks like the rubber around the edge of the seal has just degraded and kind of fallen apart, and I'm assuming that let it get loose and wiggle its way out. I guess just over time with heat cycling and vibration and whatnot, that happens. In any case, I got a new seal, so I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to take this outside and wash all the oil off of it and put it back together, and hopefully it'll work. Got that all clean, got those all clean, and got this all cleaned up. So I'm gonna slap this back together and go test it out. I mowed with this thing for a few hours and there's no more oil leaks, so that's good. I did have a small problem with it having a misfire that would go away if you put the choke halfway on. So I ended up, I took the main jet out of the carburetor and cleaned it out. It had a little bit of residue, like I think from some old gas on it. That helped, but it was still doing it a little bit, so I ended up just taking the rest of the carburetor apart and spraying everything out real good with carb cleaner, and I put it all back together and now it is running perfect. So that's really good. I didn't bother filming that because there's a million videos on how to clean the carburetor on a Kohler Command V-twin out there already, and this video is plenty long enough as is. Other than that, all I did is splash some red spray paint on my patch here so it blends in a little bit better, and I'm gonna take some pictures of this thing and list it for sale. I think it's about a week later. I ended up selling that for $2,500, which I'm really happy about because it is now the middle of September, so we are nearly to the end of the grass cutting season around here, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to sell it until next spring and it would have to sit around all winter, and I didn't want that. But it sold quick, so that's good, and I'm pretty confident that $2,500 was probably, if anything, on the higher end of what I could have expected to get for it under any circumstances. So I'm really happy about that. I had about $900 into it when all was said and done. So the $300 that I paid for it originally, and then I think like a little over $600 worth of parts that I ended up putting into it. I have no idea how much labor I put into it. I really should do a better job of keeping track of that, but I just worked on it really sporadically, which would make it kind of hard to track. And also I'm worried that if I do track it, I'll find out that I'm working for really cheap, and that will discourage me from doing stuff like this, and I kind of enjoy it, so But anyway, it just kind of reinforces what I said last time I flipped some mowers, which is that you got to buy them right. That was probably the nicest $300 zero turn that you could have expected to get, and it still took twice that again in parts to get it into a good usable condition. So again, that's definitely an important thing to keep in mind if you're shopping around for projects like this. Anyway, thanks for watching.